As we do every week, it's time to speak to the author of groundbreaking works, international bestsellers, including The War on the West, The Strange Death of Europe, and The Madness of Crowds. Douglas Murray, let's start in New Zealand. They're going to the polls on October 14, the day we vote on the race-based referendum. They'll be holding their general election, and the polls aren't looking good for the left, with Labor polling at just a little under 28%. The Greens have fallen to around 10.6% with the latest polls. It's looking like New Zealand, Douglas, is going to have a centre-right coalition, and Winston Peters may be the kingmaker. It wasn't too long ago when their Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was the darling of the global left, but she's left New Zealand in an almighty mess.
Yes, she has. And what a wonderful thing it would be. I'm always worried about tempting fate, but what a wonderful thing it would be if the New Zealand electorate showed that they had learned a lesson from Jacinda Ardern's premiership. You know, this is somebody who promised the earth and promised absolute heaven to the people of New Zealand and delivered something pretty close to hell, actually, during the COVID period. She spent all of her time emoting and showing how emotional she was, but she didn't seem to have very much care for the people that she was emoting over. I really do hope that the public in New Zealand realise that there is a difference between that sort of fake, fraudulent, empathetic type of politician and people who actually have the care of the country in their hands and deal with it and treat it appropriately. New Zealand is a great country and it deserves to be led by people who do more than just expect the world to think that they're the empathizer in chief.
Now, from Jacinda Ardern to the male Jacinda Ardern, Justin Trudeau, you wrote an excellent piece about Canada's descent into ignorance. We've got a leader there who's another media darling who likes to cultivate this image of being caring and progressive, but he's in the habit of calling decent, ordinary Canadians Nazis. He's used measures, Douglas, such as debanking to punish his critics. We've seen all sorts of sinister attacks against free speech. Douglas, what has happened in Canada?
Well, I made this intervention in the Canadian debate this week in the great National Post, I think perhaps the only remaining decent newspaper in Canada. Because I wanted to say to the Canadian public, you have no idea what the rest of the world thinks of you now. I think the rest of the world's image of Canada has tumbled enormously during the time that this superannuated drama teacher has been running Canada. And I give us one example, just that extraordinary thing that happened the other week in the Canadian Parliament. They had President Zelensky of Ukraine there, and they embarrassed him and gave a massive propaganda win to the Russians. Why? Because it turned out that the Speaker of the House of Commons in the Parliament in Canada had invited a 98-year-old Ukrainian who fought the Soviets in the 1940s, and everybody got up. Everybody got up in the Canadian Parliament, gave this man a standing ovation. Now, you don't have to be a history buff to know that a Ukrainian fighting the Soviets in the 1940s was highly likely to be fighting with the Nazis. And of course, the man did turn out to have been not just with the Nazis, but a member of the SS. And you know, just the most basic historical knowledge should have kicked in there, let alone all the security checks and anything like that. But what I find fascinating about it is this is what happens when a country loses its adults, when ignoramuses who think they know everything take charge. Justin Trudeau thinks he can spot a Nazi at 1,000,000 miles from the whiff of their exhaust fumes or the mere happenstance that they criticize him. He can tell a Nazi then, but a Nazi, an actual SS Nazi, is in a gallery above him and he's giving a standing ovation, and as is the whole of the Parliament. This is just one example of what happens when your society gets riddled by stupidity because of stupid leaders. I give plenty of other examples in the piece, but I think that Canadians should think really seriously, like the people of New Zealand, about what sort of leadership they actually want.